Hello out there in the Cotton Belt. We are coming to you this week from way out in West Texas on the high plains. We are here in Lubbock, where we're on hand to see the excellent Texas Cotton Ginners Association Gin Show, which is taking place over at the Lubbock Memorial Civic Center. I have been over there this morning just to give you an idea of what we're up to, but I've retreated back to my hotel room to record our Cotton Companion today because, man, we've got a good and topical episode cooked up for you. But things are great here in Lubbock. We've been visiting with a lot of our ginning industry friends at the show this morning. And, man, we're going to head over to the Double Nickel tonight to enjoy a nice steak. So, yeah, I've had worse times on the road with work. I'll tell you, it's going to be a nice one here in Lubbock. The bigger news out here from Lubbock, though, is that we're expecting some rain here on the high plains before the week's out. I think Saturday, there's something around a 65% chance of a nice rain coming through. So we are certainly trying to will that in existence for all of our producers out here on the high plains and elsewhere in Texas and West Texas. So, yeah, that's going to be big news if that happens here in the world's largest cotton patch, as they call it, because these guys are desperate for some soil moisture so that they can get a good crop planted here in a month or so. These guys are wanting to plant that crop because, man, we've seen some improved prices over the past month, haven't we? I suspect that we're going to see some more positive, bullish movement in that cotton market in our future. But unfortunately, that is not the only fluid variable when it comes to your bottom lines on the cotton farm in 2026. We have seen major price swings for some of your key input costs here recently, specifically with respect to fuel and fertilizer. And as you all no doubt know, a major contributor to those swings has been the ongoing situation in Iran. Just to reset here, on February 28th, the United States opened what it's calling Operation Epic Fury there in Iran. And within a day or so, the Iranians shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which is a narrow shipping lane. It's about 22 miles wide, and it connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman. It is a choke point for about 20% of the world's oil and, of course, of many other products. So the day before this operation began on February 28th, over 30 ships or so passed through that Strait of Hormuz. And by the first week of the operation, that first week of March, that number had shrunk to 3 or 4 per day. Now, obviously, the situation over there is fluid, is particularly fluid this week when we've had ostensibly a ceasefire agreed to between the United States and Iran and all of their assorted allies and proxies. Today, there are still hundreds of ships queuing in limbo there in the Gulf, unable to pass through that narrow Strait of Hormuz. While the United States and Iran did reach that ceasefire earlier this week, many of those tankers are still stuck in the Gulf because they consider that ceasefire too fragile to be trusted. The end result, I should note, this is all on April 9th. This thing changes by the day, and it's kind of foolish of me to even get into the details because it can change 30 minutes after we get done recording here. But that's where we are as of midday on April 9th. Now, the end result has been we've sent prices for fuel and fertilizer skyrocketing. And that's going to have downstream ripple effects across agriculture, across multiple crops, not only in the United States, but around the world. So while these effects are very unclear to us, luckily we are going to be talking with an expert in ag input markets in today's episode of the Cotton Companion. And he is going to break down how this volatile situation at the Strait of Hormuz will impact your bottom line in 2026. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. First thing, we are excited to hear from representatives from Delta Pine Seed Brand, proud supporters of the Cotton Companion podcast. Recently, our custom content lead, Hillary Wynn, sat down with Corey Thompson, Delta Pine Territory agronomist for out here in West Texas. And we're going to bring you that conversation right now.
Hi, I'm Hillary Wynn, custom content manager at Meister Media Worldwide, publisher of Cotton Grower Magazine. joining me today to discuss factors shaping early season growing decisions, how growers can position themselves for a smooth start, what to watch for as cotton planting gets underway, and provide guidance for successful 2026 crop is Corey Thompson. He is a Delta Pine technical agronomist in West Texas, spending much of his time in the field working one-on-one with farmers to help set them up for a successful planting season. Corey earned a PhD in cotton physiology from Texas Tech and has 5 years of Delta Pine experience and nearly 15 years in the industry. With this, he brings hands-on experience and a deep understanding of agronomic challenges facing cotton growers today. Corey, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Hillary. I'm excited for the opportunity to be a part of this.
Corey, as we head into the 2026 planting season, what key indicators should growers be watching for to determine when it's the right time to start putting seed in the ground?
So the two most important factors I'd say would be your soil temperature and your soil moisture. That soil temperature needs to be a minimum of 65 degrees. North Carolina State University has put together a planting conditions calculator that really calculates your daily high and daily low and looks at accumulated heat units over a 5-day period. So really looking for that about 50 accumulated heat units over a 5-day period, which easy math would be high of 80, low of 60. So around planting time, actually towards the end of this month, I'll start putting out weekly forecasts. So you can find those on social media or get in contact with me, get on my distribution list.
So once growers feel confident about timing, preparation really becomes the next piece of the puzzle. On that note, what steps can growers take now to ensure that they and their fields are fully prepared for successful planting season?
Yeah, so it's a good time to be going through the planters, just some of the preventative maintenance. Early in my career, I did a lot of R&D work. So one of the things I always like to do prior to planting was to raise up my closing wheels, leave that seed trench over and just verify you're getting a consistent seeding depth. You don't want to have one row unit planting shallower than another, and that can make the difference of getting a row up and another one not.
So while growers are in the field and running their planters this season, what's the single most important thing they should be paying close attention to as they plan for the growing season ahead?
So as you're planning, make sure you have a plan. Things are tight right now. Having a good plan can help ensure your success. Understand each farm's capabilities. What's that farm's APH? What are your irrigation capabilities? Some disease concerns for that farm. Let's just make sure we got the right variety for the right acre. A&M has a lot of great resources out there if you're looking at for some fertility recommendations, weed control options, anything along those lines.
To wrap things up, do you have any final tips or advice for growers as they head out into the fields this year?
As we're heading into the field, let's just make sure weed control on those top of mind. So let's make sure we got a good plan going into there. Let's start clean, stay clean. I know you always hear it, but overlap those residuals. Dr. Peter Dotre at A&M's got some great work out there just showing the importance of that early residual one at planting. And then once you go in with that early post shot, 2-3 weeks after planting to overlap another residual.
Where can our audience go for more information?
Yeah, so you can find us on social media or please feel free to contact me. I'm happy to discuss anything from planting in season observations. My number is 806-241-9396, or you can email me at corey.thompson@baylor.com.
Corey, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Oh, thank you, Hillary.
Okay, a big thank you then to Corey Thompson of Delta Pine, and of course to Hillary Wynn, our custom content editor here at Cotton Grower, for bringing us that interview from our sponsors, Delta Pine. And now, so without further ado, gang, I wanted to go ahead and bring in today's guest. That's Mr. Marc Rosenbohm with Terrain Ag. Marc, as you will hear, is an expert on these input markets and the forces that shape them. And man, we're so thankful to have him with us today. Marc, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you guys for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today.
I've been hearing a little bit about Terrain Ag from our other editorial colleagues at Meister. I understood you guys to be kind of experts in this field, and I jumped at the idea of having you on to talk about this topic, this hot button topic. And so, really, as a table setter, Marc, I wanted you to do us a favor. Can you tell our audience what you do there at Terrain Ag and just sort of explain to us why it is that you keep such a sharp eye on these crucial inputs for agriculture?
Absolutely. So, Terrain is a team of 12, including 9 economists, covering everything from almonds to wheat. And that includes major crops, livestock, animal proteins, dairy, macroeconomics, specialty crops, and wine. I think I covered everything there. And we do a variety of outlooks, research reports, and presentations to help the customers of our partnering farm credit associations make more confident and informed business decisions. That's our main mission. And our four partnering associations are Ag Country, American Ag Credit, Farm Credit Services of America, and Frontier Farm Credit at the moment. And for my part here, I cover crop markets and some of the key crop inputs and a portion of farm policy, all of which feature to varying degrees in my quarterly outlooks and presentations. But like you mentioned, I keep a close watch on some of the key ag inputs with fertilizers and fuel being two of the big ones. Getting headlines right now. These prices directly influence profitability. And when I'm putting together outlooks for the quarter or year ahead, these factors and others are crucial for our best estimate of supply and demand and ultimately prices, both here and around the world. And so that's why I keep a really close eye on those, as we think about acreage mixes and all of the other downstream effects. That's why I keep such a close eye on them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you mentioned the headline grabbers going on right now in the world, and that, of course, brings us to the situation in the Middle East, specifically to the volatility that's happening with the Strait of Hormuz, which is as uncertain as ever this week. I mean, I was just catching up on it uh, with the news sources while I'm out here at the Lubbock Convention at the Lubbock Gen Show, and yeah, there's a lot happening today, April 9th. Can you tell us? I don't want to get into the details because it's so fluid, obviously. But can you tell us generally what has happened with fuel and fertilizer prices since Operation Epic Fury began in late February?
Yeah, so I think we're in our sixth week now of the conflict, and I think my big takeaway here is that volatility has been the name of the game throughout all of this. We saw price changes from pre-war levels in the single-digit percentages up on a variety of crop prices to double-digit prices in a lot of the energy or fertilizer prices. Urea like now about 44%, heating oil or diesel futures about 52%. These are off the highs though, because as we went through the intense part of the war, I guess I would say, we got the ceasefire earlier this week. Prices came off, but if we rebounded a little bit now to kind of reflect the situation where maybe the prospect for escalating conflict isn't quite as high as it once was, but a lot of that product's still not flowing. And so when you think about a physical market, I don't know that a lot has changed, even though at the administration level, they're having what's reported to be at least a good talks or good start to talks. And so that took some of the price premium, I guess, back out of those markets. But we've seen a little bit of upward strength in some of those energy related markets again today so far.
Yeah, it's a fragile. Again, it's we're recording now, and the situation could change in a half hour, so it's kind of foolish for us to even get too deep into the weeds on the details that are happening today. But I did see, that the shipping here on April 9th, it hasn't really picked back up because they don't know if they should be trusting the ceasefire at the moment. But you're right in that it does feel like it's possible that it could open back up. It's more possible today than it was a week ago, I guess would be the safest way to couch that statement. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes a little bit of time to get the trust back, either of ship owners or insurers and or all of the market participants before we see the traffic pick back up. I think we're down to just a handful of ships a day on any given day, where I think pre-war we were looking in the hundreds, give or take, hundred give or take on a day. So it's a really busy place in the world that has not a lot of traffic going through it at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, and that's actually kind of gets into what I was going to ask you about next, Mark. And that you are an ag input is your kind of area of expertise, and I feel like some of these questions I'm asking you as if you were a geopolitical analyst or something. Um, but I just wondered if you could kind of table set for us why is this narrow waterway so impactful on these costs of these inputs, the of fuel and fertilizer?
It's a very narrow waterway, and it's highly impactful for both fuel and fertilizer because a fair portion, in percentage terms, of any of the globally traded products of those ship through this one narrow passageway. And for a lot of those products, the demand's pretty inelastic, and so we count on that product to flow when it needs to flow, and disruptions there. We have prices that ration that demand in the short run at least. And so that's part of why we see the high volatility in those prices on the expectation of what does or doesn't flow in any of those products. When I look across a lot of those products, whether it's crude oil, fuels, fertilizers, or fertilizer ingredients too, we're looking anywhere from, call it, 10 or 15% up to the mid 30% of the global trade in a lot of these products, whether it's crude oil, LNG, urea, ammonia, some of the phosphate fertilizers that ship through that strait. And it's not just for Iran, right? There's other countries that sit behind there that ship a lot of their product through there, including Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, UAE, and others that ship product through there. And so when you think about all of that product suddenly not moving, and the prospect for some of the production of that product or the production of the ingredients for those products in other countries, I'm thinking like LNG for fertilizer production in India, or things like that, or other countries in Southeast Asia. When you think about the prospect of that not getting shipped and not arriving, we have to ration that demand. We see prices rise dramatically, and then the expectations there matter a lot too. And that's partly why I think we see the volatility, and then the shape of prices going forward out there for what the market thinks how these products may flow out into the future.
Yeah, Mark, as we've seen fuel and fertilizer costs rise over the past month and a half or so, this other variable has started to happen where we've seen cotton prices have started to tick up. Cotton had a good month in March for the first time in over a year and a half. And so I think I saw as of yesterday, the near May contract prices were hovering around 71, 73 cents. And so that's significant too. So, but what has all of this price movement, both for inputs and for cotton as a commodity, what has that done for operating margins for cotton producers?
That's a very good point. I think there's a couple things going on here in cotton markets. We saw some upward strength, I think, related to these energy and fertilizer markets, both on the potential supply impact side as well as the demand side, that led to some reduction of shorts in the market there that I think added some upward strength to it too. When I think about the outlook for synthetics and some of the petroleum-based derivatives that go into those, I think that's a bit of a demand shift that may have been pushed in cotton's favor. So I think that's helping on the demand side. But I also think there's a bit of worry going on about the possible fertilizer disruptions, and what that could do for the supply prospects for other global cotton competitors. And here I'm thinking Brazil and Australia in the years ahead, as the futures market works to discount the probabilities of disruptions there for the global supply of cotton. But on the margins, I think I want to separate it into two parts. When I look at the current crop and what's going on there now, like you said, nearby prices have risen, but I think a lot of that crop has been marketed already, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so while it may favor the very tail end of that, and I think may have factored in at least a tiny bit to USDA's all cotton average price revision today, um, what I've been looking at more is the operating margin for the crop going in the ground now for the year ahead, and that's seen a lot of volatility. And I think the net combination of factors here has left this average operating margin indicator that I project actually a little bit better off than where we were pre-war, or the start of the Iran conflict. This average margin indicator I had about $110 pre-war, and we're at about $138 now. So we've added, not quite $30 of projected margin, right? There's a variety of uncertainty here in this. Some fertilizer would have been when purchased ahead, maybe some of it's yet to buy in season. Other input costs, maybe fuel, gets spread, some now, some later. So there's a variety of reasons why this might not be a hard and fast margin that I would want the listeners to count on. But I think directionally it indicates, kind of we're in a slightly better situation than we were pre-war. When I'm thinking about it in a micro context, right, this season right now. But when I take a bigger step back, like, this helps, but cotton margins aren't still necessarily great in the bigger picture of things. When I look at the kind of the best case potential for somebody who purchased inputs kind of in this October December average time period, and again these indicators I calculate are a little bit stylized. They're intended to show kind of this range of possible outcomes that could be out there. That could be up to about $180, so could have added about $70 a margin. Now, again, that's probably a best case for someone who was on the right side of things here and has been for a little while. And so I don't think that that's representative of everyone out there, but I think the reality may lay somewhere between the two. But I think my big takeaway here is the demand side. I think is important. This helps support these prices along with the net short covering to keep those prices up here at the current levels. And relative to other row crops, I'm thinking corn and soybeans and wheat here. They've seen this operating margin indicator back at or below pre-war levels, actually. So, not that cotton's in a great situation overall in the bigger picture, but relative to where we were pre-war, we're at least, I think, slightly better off.
Yeah, well, we know, I don't know if you know this, but we do an acreage projection in the winter time every year. And I am the one who has to do that. Scarily enough, I have to do math on our acreage survey that we do. But so via that process, I know that it's zero sum with corn and soybeans, particularly in the mid South, and corn and others out in the Southwest, peanuts in the Southeast. It's zero sum. How they pencil out against each other matters a great deal. So you just got done saying you think cotton has somehow actually kind of the margins have improved since Operation Epic Fury began. Do you think that we could see any major shifts in planted acres, cropping wise, out of one and into another as a result of this volatility over the past month?
Yeah, first I want to say I always pay attention to the survey results and the estimates that you guys publish along with the National Cotton Council. I think they're a really good service to the industry and one that I watch too. And when I look back across history, y'all done a pretty good job. I will say
We're getting
that.
pretty close sometimes. It's a broken clock right a couple times a day situation. Yeah, but we can get close.
But yeah, this is this acreage shift and acreage mix question is a question some of us internally have spent some time talking about. And I think I've more or less convinced myself that we'll see a little bit different acreage printed come June. But I think for me, it's hard to distinguish between normal statistical uncertainty in those numbers, and then there isn't any influence on current input price or input volatility. And I think there's two pieces to this. When I look at the survey period for when NAS did their survey, it overlapped the beginning of the war. So a few of those responses came prior to the war actually starting. But I think about 82%, if I remember correctly, were at or after the beginning. And to me, the folks that responded in maybe that first week were probably pretty certain about what they were going to do. And even the folks that responded in the second week, I think there was about 40 some percent in that second week. We had started to see those effects priced into markets. If you were worried about fertilizer, you probably called your fertilizer dealer to see what you could get and at what price. We couldn't get prices for a little while, but then, we could get prices after that. And so I think the survey probably does a pretty good job reflecting what intentions are out there. But again, I think the number will be different. But it's hard for me to distinguish what might be just normal survey response uncertainty and what might have actually happened from the market.
Well, it's pre-plant season. It's still decision season for some guys. Like most are kind of set in stone what they're going to do. As we podcast on April 9, I tell people all the time, the farm I grew up on in the Mississippi Delta, April 25 was when we wanted to get started planting. And so, yeah, this is the time of year where most of those guys are doing prep work. Um, all that said, what is your advice for cotton producers in this season pre-plant who are suddenly confronted with these shifting input costs and perhaps a rosier pricing scenario What should they be doing with all of these moving fluid margins?
And this is one thing I'm sure they're already doing, but I would encourage them to take a holistic look at their situation. That's the combination of both input costs at either what they own them for or what they can get them for now, and compare that against the price that they expect to receive, and pay attention to that margin there. At the beginning of the war, we saw a lot of talk about what percent crop prices were moving, whether it's cotton, wheat, corn, beans, the whole everything. And then also how much input prices were moving, but that margin there is what we're really trying to take home at the end of the day. And high input prices by themselves are not necessarily bad if crop prices more broadly and cotton prices here specifically are at sufficient levels. And so that's why I think I would encourage everybody to take a good look at both sides of this. And while I don't give specific marketing advice, when I look out across the landscape of ag markets and I think about where these current projected margins are and where I think the balance of risk lies, I think it might make some sense for producers to consider at least some sort of price floor or downside protection. So major, and I mean worse than what we've seen in the past 6 weeks. Fertilizer or energy issues probably tighten expected supplies in the year or two ahead. This would be something like a resumption of the conflict or something where the ceasefire totally falls apart. I think that's a risk. I don't know that I have a specific probability to put on it at the moment, but it's a risk that sits out there. And the effects of energy and biofuel markets would impact other crop markets and ultimately spill over back into cotton and cotton prices and the expected area trade-offs. Like we're talking about, maybe a few marginal acres switching here and there. I don't mean marginal in quality. I mean marginal in choice. And, sustained higher energy prices. We could see higher inflation here or around the world, as well as sustained disruption in energy flows. Could be a drag on global GDP or consumer incomes or some other macro factors like that. And so when I'm thinking about this kind of balance of factors, I'm not quite there yet that we're going to have a severe consumer response to this. I think my expectation, and from what I can kind of see price into markets, I think is kind of a moderate impact, moderate duration event. And so that's kind of how I'm seeing those markets there, and what I think producers should be watching. And from the prospect of all of these, and there's some positive aspects of these factors to cotton prices, and some could be negative. I think it makes sense for producers to consider at least protecting a bit of the downside while leaving some or all of their upside open, because there may be some opportunities ahead.
Yeah, Mark, this discussion, man, it's been enlightening for me. The concept of having penciling out operational costs and that type of thing. It's eye opening for me, and I know that our audience appreciates it too, man. Thank you so much for being with us today. Our audience knows I'm here in Lubbock, and as well. I'm here in Lubbock this week, and I am going to be doing some rain dances with some of these farmers out here. And that you may have to factor that in the next podcast you're on, because we think we may get some rain here this weekend. So, man, I appreciate you so much for joining us today and for sharing your expertise. And don't be surprised if I start leaning on you more often, because this was truly great.
Happy to be here today. Happy to join you for this. I hope the listeners got something out of it, and appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir, Mark. Thank you so much. Have a great one. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Cotton Companion podcast. Thanks go out especially to Bayer and Delta Pine for their support, and of course to our guest, Mr. Marc Rosenbohm of Terrain Ag. And as always, we want to thank you, dear listener, for joining us and for your continued support. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you did like what you heard, please be sure and spread the word. Tell your farming friends and neighbors about the Cotton Companion podcast. Here's where and how they can find us.
You can find the Cotton Companion in 3 easy ways. First, go to cottongrower.com/companion, or simply click the podcast tab at the top of the homepage. Second, subscribe to our channel on iTunes or wherever you find your podcasts these days. And 3, sign up for our weekly e-newsletter, the Cotton Grower e-News, that's delivered to your email inbox every Tuesday morning. You can do that by going to cottongrower.com/subscribe. Also, be sure to follow Cotton Grower on social media. We are at Cotton Grower Mag on Twitter, and on Facebook, you'll find us by searching for Cotton Grower Magazine.
Companion Podcast is produced by Mr. Tyler Hatch and Miss Kim Henderson, our talented colleagues at the world headquarters for Meister Media Worldwide in lovely Cleveland, Ohio. I am Beck Barnes, and we're going to be back with you in a couple of weeks with the next episode of The Cotton Companion.
'Cause God made me a farmer. Yeah, he works and he works and he works and he works all day.